It is my great honor to introduce our next speaker, Elizabeth Ayisi. Elizabeth has a doctorate from Patton College of Education at Ohio University, where she specialized in mathematics education and educational research and evaluation. She holds a Bachelor of Arts Degree in mathematics from the College of Wooster and a Master of Science in mathematics from John Carroll University. Elizabeth's experience includes complex analysis, differential geometry, functional analysis, statistics, and a use of quantitative statistical analysis techniques such as analysis of variance, linear regression, Monte Carlo simulation, structural equation modeling, and research methodologies, among others. Thank you so much for joining us today, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much for that incredible introduction. Are you able to see my
Yes, we can see you now.
Myself and hear me as well.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. And also thank to QSide. Special thank you to Jude and Halima for assessing me through this presentation. I would like to also say thank you all for being here today. And I'm also excited to be here, to be among great educators and great researchers as we discuss data for social science and social justice. I'm gonna share my screen. Are you able to see my screen, please?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So today I want to talk to you about sociocultural teaching and learning, and also pick up a study from my dissertation where I talk about implementing equitable transition from high school to college. A little bit of background about myself. I am a first generation Ghanaian American, and I do want to provide better transition to all students and also help them have that mathematics transitional experience from high school to college. I also support all educators who really strive to achieve social justice, and that's why I'm here. Thank you so much. And also equity, to develop and expand students' positive mathematics identities, and also programs that also promote STEM fields or professionals or K through 12 role models for students. So when we talk about the importance of Black students' experiences in the transition, we want to really ensure that they would not be society progress where they are not left to be slip up through the cracks. And so when it comes to race, society's blindness forces radical measures to avoid these processes being stalled. I'll be using three lenses as I go through my presentation. The Schlasberg transition theory that allows me to look at each student's transition, whether it's an anticipated transition or unanticipated transition or non-events. In my research, all these students did anticipate to transition from high school into some sort of STEM program in the undergraduate. The other theoretical framework that I'll be using is critical race theory, where Dixon and all talks about or explain it as where it's a research methodology that privileges the voices of those who bear the brunt of and relies heavily on storytelling, and that's going to be my main methodology today, as I'll share student stories as they transition from high school to college with you. And once they share these stories, as opposed to an analytic mean, as we've heard some of our presenters show us about quantitative data for social justice. So for critical race theory, when it comes to storytelling, I'm looking at the not the analytic piece, but looking at stories that people of color share with us. And in critical race theory, this storytelling or counter story or counter narrative is a means or as a methodology to present these stories. Lastly, I will use mathematics identity, as all these students have in common that they transition from high school to college into a STEM program. And we know that each STEM, whether science, technology, engineering, or mathematics, requires some level of higher mathematics, especially calculus, to major in STEM. So a little reflection here. I want you all to imagine the time that you were in high school, when you were ready to transition from high school to college. Also think about your social environment, or the culture that was in your environment, whether it was school or it was at home. And reflect back to this time when you attended college as well for the first time. And remember the experiences in those transitions that you faced through or you experienced. And that's what I will employ using critical race theory methodology as a framework to really showcase the complexities and also the richness of Black students, their educational experiences in this current educational system. Why do we care about that? Well, let's look at the problem that is at hand. When it comes to sociocultural approaches to teaching, it is the fundamental or the foundation on which culturally responsive teaching is really based on. And when we look at Black students' path to success, it comes from a culturally responsive approach rather than pointing out, let's say, the deficits. We can look at this as the potential to enlist them in some sort of a constructive learning, also in and out of the classroom. So looking at the problem here about Black STEM majors, let me move this here, okay. Black STEM students have the smallest percentage when we were looking at bachelor's degrees compared to men, and also compared to women in the United States. In the same token, the percentage of Black degrees endowed to Black students is significantly lower than the comprehensive percentage when we are looking at college degrees endowed to STEM students. Also, when we look at STEM college degrees and we look at the degrees compared to men versus women, we can see that the percentage are not the same. Also, the success of Black women in STEM, especially in mathematics, as I look at the mathematics transition from high school to college, has received very small share of attention when it comes to mathematics education in the United States. Now, these are two books I will recommend to read when it comes to understanding the background of critical race theory and knowing about its tenets. Today, I'm only going to focus on one of its tenets, which I said I'll be using Counterstories. I will share the student stories with you as they transition from high school to college. Now, I look at their social relationship, their cultural relationship, their socioeconomic status, their linguistic demographics, and also the racial diversity in the school that I did my research in. When we look at Counterstory, this is also another book that we can also look at, not paid for us. It's a really good book when you want to get into Counterstories. Now, for culturally responsive teaching, when we come to the classroom, this method works for every student, and that's what we are advocates. And so one of the responsibilities of culturally responsive teacher is to really involve all students to construct contextually contextual knowledge where they can construct and question and pose questions to really understand the content of whether it's a mathematical concept or it's a science concept. And this approach, it provides students for all, it provides solutions for all students during their transition from high school to college. And as we can see, we see that in the culturally responsive instruction, we combine the family community engagement. We also combine and look at the social emotional skills, collaboration across cultural communications, global awareness, all this in the classroom, we are saying is going to help students have a better transition, especially when they are transitioning from high school into a STEM program, as teachers implement this teaching method. So in this study, let's envision, when I said imagine when you were in high school. In the study, students that I interviewed, I positioned them in a framework that I'm looking, whether from critical race theory lens or Schlasberg's transition theory. I looked at their environment, their social environment as well, and also the cultural environment. What they shared in common was that they were all STEM students, and they've all completed some part, or at least half of the way from high school to college, because they were all college students. And so we look at Counterstory, and as the methodology that I use here, what is a Counterstory or a counter narrative? It's some sort of conceptual tool of critical race theory, and the main source for collecting data that I use for this current study. It's also important through the lens of critical race theory that we see and also open some sort of window for students' experiences, as each student will have a different experience. And so storytelling in that reveals a clash of stories, because each student have a different experience coming from a different background. Now, people's story didn't really agree with one another, as every student was different and they had different background that they came from. So Delgado and Stefanczyk talks about Counterstory in their textbook, in one of their books, and they propose that storytelling in court or even on the defense it's a cure for silence. And these counter stories can open some sort of window onto what we ignore, or even the alternative realities that we've ignored. And so to cure the silence of Black people, it's really important and paramount that we start to understand and their reaction towards discriminatory practices as they transition through school, whether it's from K through 12 and beyond. And so reports that I'll be reporting here is strictly from my dissertation, where students managed to boost their self-confidence, their self-efficacy, their self-concept, and also have some sort of resilience as they transition through high school to college, and also receiving support from family and parents and counselors as well. Now, the participants in this study were seven undergraduate students, and I assigned this name to them. I am originally from Ghana, and in the Ghanaian society in the Ashanti region, we have an earth name for every day of the week that you were born. So 7 days that I interviewed 7 students, I gave them the name based on their earth day. Ekua is a Black woman in her early 20s who graduated in spring of 2022 with a Bachelor of Science in Translational Biosciences. She is currently employed as a microbiologist at a major pharmaceutical company in Ohio. Now, Ama is also a Black woman in her early 20s. She is an undergraduate student in chemical and biomolecular engineering program. And Ama is currently participating in an internship at a biopharmaceutical company in a state bordering Ohio, and expects to graduate from college in the spring of 2022. Akosia is also a Black woman in her mid-20s, who is currently a graduate student in public health. Akosia's mathematics identity was formed because she felt she was very open-minded, and through mentorship that she received, and also her mathematics understanding from her high school. The last woman that I interviewed, Abena is also in her mid-20s and is currently pursuing a PhD in translation biomedicine. Abena attended high school in Ghana and currently doing her PhD here in the States. She, her mathematics identity was also formed from her self-confidence in learning the unknown, and also encouragement she received from her parents, as she expressed that to me. Yao is a Black man in his early 20s who works for a pharmaceutical company in Southwestern Ohio. Yao holds a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering. Yao was persistent in being in the STEM field all the way from middle school. He knew that he wanted to be in STEM in college. And so when he was in high school, he took courses such as honors courses, including calculus, to get him prepared for that transition to STEM program. Kwadwo is a Black man in his mid-20s who is currently working as an engineer at a company in Southwestern Ohio. Kwadwo grew up in a Nigerian household with parents who both attended college. So education was very, very valuable to his family. And so that had a very big influence on Kwadwo, and that is also his academic path. He completed his bachelor's degree in chemical engineering. Lastly, Kofi is a Black man in his mid-20s who is currently working as an intern at a technology company in Central Ohio. Kofi is pursuing a bachelor's degree in computer science with a minor in mathematics. He expects to graduate in fall of 2022, and Kofi grew up in a Ghanaian household with 3 older siblings who already attended high school. Now, in this transition for all these students, they anticipated to transition from high school into a STEM program. So after interviewing these students and gathering all the data through qualitative semi-structured interview, looking at how they constructed their positive mathematics identity, and in the context of students' transition from high school to college, and effectively assisting Black students, requiring encouraging them to achieve roles in constructing both mathematical content knowledge and also understanding the mathematical concept. So this goal can really be achieved not only by the individual experiences with each other, but also by social interactions and also their linguistic reading and writing as well. Now, all these participants differ. They all came from different families, different backgrounds, different kind of high schools, and that they attended. And the mathematics courses they enrolled in high school and college also differed. And their positive mathematical identities really helped them through this transition into a STEM program or a STEM major. Now, these narratives I shared with you show that mathematics identities of these students, of these high achieving students, Black students, were related to how they formulated and constructed self-identity through self-efficacy, self-confidence, self-concept, as we see through this presentation, how they constructed positive mathematics identity. So we take these pieces, and so how I defined self-confidence is that having faith and certainty in something or someone, and also trusting one's own ability to learn something, or having the motivation or interest towards something or towards an object. A self-confidence could be also trusting whether or not you have the level of knowledge is sufficient or to succeed. And also examples of self-confidence that students shared with me that they practice and they experience in college, were enrolling or participating in leadership roles that boosted their self-confidence, or being able to simply ask a question in the classroom or going to office hours also boosted their self-confidence when they were learning mathematical concepts, or even being in roles of mentorship and also their success in performing mathematical problems or mathematical course was a very key to their identity. And I want to share a quote with you that alludes to a student expressing their self-confidence. And this is from Ekuya, who I said was a Bachelor of Science in Translational Biosciences. Ekuya said, "We should be very open-minded and definitely use your resources." I know a lot of people forget about tutoring or supplementary instructions or academic tutoring and things like that. Plus, being on campus helps a lot. You get all these resources, and I know my university has a lot of these resources available. Even when I was a mentor, I had some freshmen coming in, and I definitely try to remind them to use their resources, even if it's not a tutor, to ask a friend and a classmate and go to the professor's office hours. And this is what Ekuya would like to share with people going into the STEM field as they transition from high school to college. Another example from for self-confidence from a Bachelor of Chemical Engineering. This must be Yao. Yao said, "Don't give up because it's hard. Because as a Black student in STEM, it is going to be hard." And he want to tell you not to give up because it's going to be hard. And he thinks that a lot of people like to do, they just see something that is hard, so they give up. And they feel like there could be an easy way, an easy route to do it. But sometimes you just got to check through the tough times in order to reap the benefits of the success you would gain from being persistent and consistent. So the first year students, I would say, find your crew, laugh with each other, and just be consistent in solving math problems. And you are doing and be consistent with your study. Because when you are not consistent, it's hard. It is hard to succeed when you are not consistent. And if you do not find yourself in a situation where you fail, you can allow yourself to fail or to feel past the end, because with failure comes success. Now, let's move on to self-confidence. Self-confidence, we define self-confidence in the dissertation as believing in one's ability. Now, when students have self-confidence, they can believe, they have the tendency to pursue the interest in career they want or an educational choice, especially when they can construct these constructs, self-efficacy from the childhood. Also, a lived experience in a content-specific context of one's ability to perform some task or an assignment. So if we look at examples of self-efficacy, it could be the ability in a content area, the ability to solve mathematical problems. It boosts your self-efficacy. Or time students would take to take a summer course just so they can be ahead of their mathematics class. So earlier, Dr. Joe Bollard shared with us the mathematics pathway. And when we looked at the pathway, especially for STEM students, it's almost like they have to be in a very good path, especially starting from middle school. And very difficult that if they are not on that path, that they can pursue a STEM degree when they go to college, which is unequitable for our students. And so an example for self-efficacy is that students will use YouTube videos to find role models through encouragements to hear and see people who look like them, who have been through spaces that they are trying to be in. And also one example could be how students learn to cope with their academic skills or their academic failures. And so in college, with college mathematics, I'm not going to say there's a right way to study, but there is a way to study for college mathematics. And I wouldn't grasp it, and I couldn't grasp it, sorry. But it was one night I was studying for math, and I was like, let me go and look at the book. Even though it sounds like very simple, my class didn't focus on the book at all. Like Dr. A told us, you can get the book, but I am not going to teach you out of the book. So I let go. Let me go look at the book. So I was doing problems out of the book. And I think the next exam, I got a B on it. So I was like, okay, maybe I've actually figured it out. And for me, at least, the book example problems are where I learned. But then the next class, I tried this tactic and it didn't work because this is a professor that didn't use the textbook, and he made all the examples up in his head and double checked them to make sure that they worked. So I was like, now I actually need to understand the concepts. And that's where students really build their self-efficacy, their self-confidence, and their self-concepts in doing mathematical problems. Now, when we talk about self-concept, this is how
I'm so sorry. We are running really short on time.
Okay.
Can you wrap up in the next minute or so?
Yes.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry to interrupt.
That's okay. Let me share my screen again. Sorry. So just quickly share the example, the codes for self-concepts. There are gaps in my resources, just the things that I didn't know. One, just the lack of resources and networking and mentorship that you can get from a community that really influence you to your career trajectory, because I didn't even really get proper mentorship until my graduate school. Most people who are in this space of high achieving space all come from privileged backgrounds, and I didn't come from privileged background, but knowing what I know, I'm here. And I did that because I needed to demonstrate to others that look like me, that come from me or same background as me, that you are very much capable. And we also need to set our own stories in the kind of spaces. So I think these two things were definitely barriers that I think sometimes use those barriers as strategies to keep pulling and pushing, because, I realized that it could be particularly barriers for others, and I didn't want to be barriers for others. So I definitely, mentorship is a core, and that was Akosia speaking. So lastly, resilience. All students showed resiliency. Future research that I'm working on, working with my committee as well. I want to just say quickly, thank you to Dr. Hess, thank you to Dr. Hartman, Dr. Scone, and Dr. Kennedy for supporting me through this research.